And we haven't covered nearly everything we're going to cover. But everywhere we've been so far, think of this. Jesus was raised in Nazareth. Starts his ministry coming out of there, Canaan, and then along the Galilee and the Capernaum and all in there. He winds up, of course, down in Jerusalem and all through there. Then during his 3 years of ministry, he takes his disciples. This is the northernmost place he brings his disciples. And there's a very important reason why. We're going to talk about it in a moment. But he brings them here. And they're on their way to Jerusalem. Now, it'll take a while to get there. They're going to go from here down along the way of the Jordan. They're going to go through Jericho. Then they're going to go up from Jericho to Jerusalem. From there, he's going to deliver himself. But they come here first, before that journey. And there's a very important reason. But here's what I want you to remember. All of these places we've been, from Nazareth, okay, Mount Carmel, Tabor, all that you've seen, all of that territory. Now all of the ride took us 2 hours to get here today by bus on highways, and then we're going to go to Jerusalem, later on in this tour. In 3 years, Jesus and his disciples walked every bit of this. Now think of that. One of those spiritual places, New Testament biblically speaking, that we will be and where you are seated. Here's why. Jesus purposed to bring his disciples here to Caesarea Philippi. You're looking at the ruins, you saw some of the ruins. This was a thriving place in its day. In fact, it was named after an emperor or an emperor's son, and it was dedicated to everything Roman and everything pagan. And this was a place very spiritual, very religious, but when I say spiritual and religious, I don't mean the good side. I mean, it was filled with pagan worship and emperor worship and sacrifices and all of the nastiness and the occult and the satanic you can think of. Jesus brings his disciples to this area. Now, most of you know Matthew 16, and I'm just going to paraphrase it right now, but he brings them here. And I don't know exactly when it happens, day, night, but I envision them sitting around kind of like this, and maybe they're cooling off in the middle of the day. Maybe it's nighttime, they're gathered around the fire, but they're kind of concluding the day probably. Think of this when they're walking all during these 3 years. Think of the teaching that Jesus did along the way, the talking, the fun they had. Jesus, he laughed, he had fun, he cut up, he made jokes, and the disciples, they loved him, and they were very close. And so along the way, that's why John ends his gospel by saying, after he tells the whole gospel story, he ends it by saying, but there's no way that I could tell you how many other things he said and taught, and no way I could record all the miracles he did, because the libraries of the world could not contain the books. And what he meant was, he's sitting here teaching, and they're talking, and just the scripture presents it. It's almost like this casual thing. He does like Brother Zeb. He says, I got a question for you. I have a question for you. Who do men say that I am? And the disciples are going around, answering the questions. Well, some say, you're John the Baptist that's come back from the dead. And others say that you're Elijah. Some say you're one of the great prophets. And so he lets them finish, and then he says, well, and I'm adding a few words, but he says, most importantly, who do you say I am? Remember that? Well, Peter kind of speaks for the whole crowd there. He says, in the King James, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. You remember what Jesus said? He said, blessed are you people. Because you see, flesh and blood, what we're going to see in a few moments is what a lot of scholars believe is what Jesus was talking about. Of course, the gates of hell, the gates of Hades, the gates of death and destruction, and kind of Satan doesn't control hell. Sometimes people talk about, Satan being the Lord of hell. Jesus said he's the God of this age. He's the prince of this world. But the thing is his whole reign of death and terror is how he keeps a grip on all human race. So in that way, he's kind of the prince of hell, if you will. So when he says the gates of hell will not prevail against you, not only do we understand, most of us understand what Jesus meant with that in the spiritual realm, but here's what I wanted you to know in the physical, practical realm, right here in Caesarea Philippi. Because this is one of the most pagan, occultic, religious, spiritual, demonic places in ancient Israel. Jesus brings them here, and he says, tell me, who do you say I am now? Right here, who do you say I am? And Am I just a prophet, just a teacher, just a man that's religious? Who do you say I am? No, you're God in the flesh who's come into his own creation. You are the Messiah. You are the Christ. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Why? So when he speaks of the gates of hell, in this place, you're going to see in a few moments the cave of Pan, where sacrifices were made, where they would take the human sacrifices, and they had rituals. They would put the body in the headwaters of the Jordan River through here. If the body floated, then the gods accepted the sacrifice. If the body sank, and it was nasty. It was nasty. That cave, there are quite a few scholars who really believe that that cave, you can see it, was called the gates of heaven because it's so demonic in the demonic sacrifices that took place there. So he was using this whole place as an object lesson because in a few weeks he would be on the cross in Jerusalem. Now, you know what's cool about that? This whole region is called, this area here is also called Bashan, the region of Bashan, the hills of Bashan, which is below Mount Hermon, the Golan Heights. Og of Bashan, he's the king of Og, one of the last of the Rephaim, the Bible says in Judges chapter 14. Rephaim means the giants, and or there's different scholars believe the what?
Ghosts also.
Yeah, it also means like spirits, ghosts, those of the dead of the underworld, the Rephaim. So here's Og of Bashan, who's this giant of a man. He's ruling in this area, and he's a formidable force in the area of Bashan, the hills of Bashan. Now watch. Psalm 22 that Jesus quoted on the cross by the first verse. My God, why have you forsaken me? Most of you know this from teachings that Zev and I have done. You've already mentioned it to us. I've written about it in my books. We've been on TV together. We've talked about it. But the point is, a lot of people have said over the years, well, when Jesus cried that out, he did that because God forsook him and God turned his back on his son because he was carrying the sins of the world, etc. Psalm 22 says that's not why. Psalm 22 goes on, if you keep reading it, it says, and God did not turn his back on his Holy One. God did not refuse to hear the cries of his suffering one, his Christ, his Messiah. What Jesus was doing, he was referring, he's on the cross, he can't get a speech, he can't get a sermon, he's down trying to get a breath. So he can't recite everything, he's just referring them to the 22nd Psalm, which was written 1,000 years before it was fulfilled. That's the Psalm of David, where David is in the spirit of prophecy. He's talking about himself at first. It's called a compound prophecy. The first several verses really is about David and all the travails in his life. And David's crying out, God, please don't forsake me. Why have you turned your back on me? But then it begins to move, and you see this transformation, and David begins describing a scene, but we know who it happened to. Because then it goes saying, I'm going to take it a little bit out of order because I want to give you the surprise last. But he's saying, he starts describing this scene, and he says, people mock me, my bones are out of joint. They stare at me, and they say, he saved others, let him save himself. It comes right from the cross. It comes right from here. And then it says, they have pierced my hands. They gallop my clothing under my feet. It says this is it says, my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth, and I thirst. Where's that coming from? How did David see this 1,000 years before it happened? Right down to gambling, clothing, the piercing of the hands and the feet. His thirst, his extreme thirst, crying out for relief. His bones out of joint, which is what crucifixion does, because you're hanging for hours on your joints from nails, and he's pushing up and breathing. So in the midst of all of that, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? When he gets a breath, and then he falls back down. He's basically saying, go look at Psalm 22. Right after that, you know what the Gospels say? That the Roman centurion who had overseen the crucifixion says, the Bible says, hearing what he said and seeing how he was dying, the Roman centurion said, we've just killed the Son of God. Surely this man was the Son of God. Because he knew Psalm 22. A lot of the people in the crowd would have known it. The Roman centurions oftentimes made themselves available to the holy writings of the people over whom they were in charge of, so that they could know their mind better. So like if you were living in Nazareth and you were supposed to be appointed by your nation to some high position here, and you were going to live here for the rest of your life, you would certainly study the Muslim religion as deeply as you could to understand their scriptures and their way of thinking, because now you're in charge of these people, right? That's what the Roman centurions did. They were in charge of keeping the peace. They had to know the mindset of the people. And here he is crying out, I think y'all might have just killed the Son of God. Look, his hands, his feet. Look, my soldiers are gambling for his clothing. Look, his joints are. Listen to what you're saying. You're repeating the words of Psalm 22 that was prophesied that you would say. But here's what's cool. Right before all of that, Jesus said, I'm taking them out of order because I want to save the best to the last. He says, lions surround me, looking to tear me apart like a prey. Well, what are we warned in the New Testament? Beware. Satan prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour. He says lions surround me. And then he says dogs surround me. And then he goes on to say these dogs are the important religious people there that are, what we now know as Pharisees and Sadducees. They're mocking him. But before that, you know what he said? He said, I see the strong bulls of Bashan. They are surrounding me. That word bull is kind of like our word snake. If I say, oh my gosh, there's a snake, y'all are going, oh, or I can see a group of people coming and I can say, look at that snake in the grass. I know that guy. So I've used the same word. One of them is a real snake. There's not a real snake. One of them, she's going, really? Really? One of them is a real snake, but you can use it metaphorically for a person. The lion, the dogs, he didn't see a real lion. He didn't see real dogs. He didn't see real bulls. He was seeing, David was seeing the demonic realm of Bashan. And that word bull can be used, well, actually it says the mighty bulls. And that mighty one is used to speak of angels. That word in Hebrew. The mighty ones. The bulls of Bashan. So these are not good angels. This is the demonic. It's right there in Psalm 22. And it refers to this region where Jesus had just been with his disciples. He is dogged by Satan and the demonic realm all the way to the cross. And on the cross, those people that are saying, you say, brothers, why don't you save yourself? Come down from the cross. How was Jesus tempted in the wilderness by Satan? Throw yourself down off this mountain if you are the Son of God. The angels will save you. The mighty ones will save you. You see the connection to all this? So anyway, he's going to teach some more